It was a chilly evening in early spring, and the small-town community hall was full of warmth, laughter, and the smell of home-cooked food. The annual charity gathering had always been a chance for everyone to come together, share stories, and raise money for the local children's hospital. Fairy lights hung loosely from the ceiling, flickering softly like tiny stars. Tables were covered in white cloths, and the air buzzed with cheerful voices. In one corner of the hall stood an old upright piano. Its wood was faded, and a few of the keys had long lost their shine. A couple of them were chipped, and when pressed, they made a dull sound instead of a clear note. Nobody took it seriously. It had become something of a decoration more than an instrument. People often joked that the piano was more broken than working. A group of younger guests stood near it, sipping drinks and laughing among themselves. One of them, a man with a playful grin, nudged his friend and pointed toward the piano. "Hey, I bet no one here can make that thing sound half decent," he joked. The group chuckled. "Maybe we should find someone to play it," another said, half laughing. "Let's see if anyone can bring it back to life." Their eyes wandered around the room until they landed on a woman standing near the refreshment table. She was quiet, standing a little away from the main crowd, holding a cup of tea in both hands. She wore a simple cardigan and had a calm, gentle look about her. Her hair was tied loosely at the back, and her shoes looked well worn. She smiled politely whenever someone walked past, but didn't talk much. "Ask her," one of them said, nudging the first man. "Who? Her?" he asked, surprised. "Yeah. She looks like she might know how to play. Or maybe she just looks like someone who'd try," the friend teased. The man grinned. It was meant as a joke, nothing serious. He walked over, his friends watching with amusement. The woman looked up as he approached. "Evening," he said kindly. "We were just wondering if you'd like to give that old piano a try. It hasn't made a decent sound all night." She blinked, surprised by the sudden request. For a moment she looked at the piano, then back at him. "Oh, I don't know," she said softly, her voice calm but unsure. "It looks quite old. That's the point," he chuckled. "We thought we'd see if anyone can get a tune out of it. Just for fun, you know." A few people nearby overheard and started watching with curious smiles. The woman hesitated. She wasn't the type to seek attention. She had come to the event to help serve food earlier, and planned to slip away quietly once things wound down. She had never liked being the center of a crowd, but something about the moment made her pause. Maybe it was the laughter around her, or maybe it was the challenge in the man's tone. Not unkind, but teasing. "Well," she said finally, setting her cup down, "I suppose I could try." The man looked surprised that she agreed. He laughed lightly. "Really? That's great. Come on then." The crowd nearby turned their attention toward the piano. Some smiled, others whispered, wondering if she actually knew how to play. The woman walked over slowly, her steps careful, her hands clasped in front of her. When she reached the piano, she looked at it for a moment, as if greeting an old friend she hadn't seen in years. The bench creaked slightly as she sat down. Dust rose from the surface when she touched the keys. She pressed one gently. It gave a dull, uneven sound. A few people laughed softly. Someone called out, "Careful! It might fall apart." She smiled politely but said nothing. Her fingers rested on the keys for a few seconds, unmoving. Then, almost unconsciously, she began to play a simple scale, her fingers moving lightly, testing the feel of the piano. The sound was rough, uneven, but her hands moved with practiced ease. It wasn't random pressing, there was purpose, control. The laughter died down a little. The man who had invited her to play leaned against a table, suddenly curious. She adjusted her seat slightly and pressed a few more keys, then took a deep breath. Without saying a word, she started to play. At first, the melody was faint, hesitant, as if she was finding her footing. But then something changed. Her hands began to move with confidence and grace. The music grew clearer, flowing out of the broken piano in waves. It was a soft, beautiful tune, a melody that seemed too delicate for such an old instrument. The people around her grew quiet one by one, their smiles fading into awe. The piano still creaked and buzzed on some notes, but somehow it didn't matter. Her touch made it sound alive. Her body swayed gently as she played, her eyes half closed, lost in the music. The broken notes seemed to blend perfectly into the piece, as though they belonged there all along. By now, everyone in the hall had noticed. Conversation stopped. Even the children fell silent. People turned to watch the woman at the piano, their faces softening as the melody filled the room. No one expected it. What started as a playful challenge had turned into something else entirely. The woman who seemed shy and ordinary just moments ago now looked transformed. There was calm power in the way she played, a quiet strength that drew everyone in. The man who had asked her to play felt a flush of embarrassment. He hadn't meant any harm. It was just a harmless joke, but he realized now that there was more to her than he had guessed. He glanced at his friends, and they all stood in silence, watching as if afraid to move. The song continued, full of emotion. It wasn't loud or fast, but it carried a deep feeling, something that spoke of memories, of time lost, of quiet sorrow mixed with peace. Some of the older guests exchanged looks, their eyes glistening slightly. The melody reminded them of old times, of songs they hadn't heard in years. When the last note faded, it hung in the air like a sigh. For a few seconds, nobody moved. The woman lifted her hands slowly from the keys and placed them on her lap. She didn't look around right away. It was as if she herself had just woken up from a dream. Then came the sound of clapping, soft at first, then growing louder. The hall filled with applause. Some people even stood up. The woman looked up, surprised, her cheeks turning a little red. She smiled shyly and nodded in thanks. The man who had asked her to play stepped forward, still clapping. "That was incredible," he said quietly, almost in disbelief. "Where did you learn to play like that?" She gave a small smile. "Oh, it was a long time ago," she said gently. "I haven't played in years." People began talking again, but now with softer voices. The laughter returned, not mocking this time, but warm and genuine. Someone went to fetch her another cup of tea. A few asked her to play another song, but she only shook her head with a kind smile. "Maybe later," she said quietly. "Once is enough for now." As the night went on, the piano remained in the corner, silent again, but no longer forgotten. People passed by it, looking at it differently now. It was still old, still missing a few keys, but it had just reminded them that beauty could come from the most unexpected places. And the woman, who had seemed so simple and unassuming when she first arrived, had unknowingly left a mark on everyone in that room. No one would forget the moment she sat down at that broken piano and made it sing again. The man who had asked her to play watched her from a distance later that evening. She was talking quietly with a few older guests, smiling in that calm, gentle way. He felt a mix of admiration and guilt. He hadn't meant to embarrass her, but in a strange way he was glad he had asked. Because if he hadn't, none of them would have known what she carried inside. The night slowly wound down. People began leaving in small groups, still talking about the surprise performance. The woman stayed to help clean up, stacking cups and wiping tables like nothing special had happened. When someone thanked her for playing, she just smiled and said, "It was nice to touch the keys again." Outside, the cold wind blew gently through the streets. The lights of the hall glowed warmly behind her as she walked home. She didn't think much about what had happened. To her, it was just a small moment, a few minutes of music after many years of silence. But for everyone who had been there that night, it was something more. It was a reminder that sometimes, even the quietest people have stories and gifts that the world forgets to see. And all it took to reveal it was an old, broken piano, and a simple woman brave enough to play it. The next morning, the town was still buzzing from the night before. At the bakery, people talked about the charity event between bites of fresh bread and sips of coffee. The story spread quickly, the way small-town stories always do. Everyone seemed to have seen the woman play, or at least knew someone who had. By noon, the tale had already grown larger than life. "They say she made that broken piano sound like something out of a concert hall," one man told his friend as they waited in line. "I heard she used to play professionally," another added, lowering her voice as if sharing a secret. The truth was, most people didn't know much about her. She lived alone in a small house near the edge of town. She was polite, always willing to lend a hand, but she kept to herself. Most saw her as the quiet lady who volunteered at the library or helped at the community kitchen. Few knew what her life had once been. That morning, she woke up early as she always did. Her small house was simple. A few framed photos, some books, and an old radio that played soft music while she made tea. The air smelled faintly of lavender from a candle she liked to light in the mornings. As she stirred her tea, her thoughts went back to the night before. She hadn't planned to play at all. It had just happened. The memory of the applause still made her blush. She hadn't been in front of a crowd in decades. She went about her day as usual, but she could feel something different in the air. When she stepped outside to buy groceries, people greeted her with wider smiles than usual. "You were wonderful last night," said an older woman who worked at the flower shop. "You made me cry. I didn't even know you could play." The woman smiled gently. "Thank you. I didn't think anyone would remember." "Oh, they remember," the florist laughed. "You should have seen the looks on everyone's faces." At the grocery store, a young boy tugged his mother's hand and pointed. "That's the lady who played the piano, isn't it?" The mother smiled warmly. "Yes, sweetheart, that's her." It was strange for her to be noticed after so long. She had lived quietly for years, content to stay out of the spotlight. Life had been busy once, full of rehearsals, music sheets, and travel. But that had all faded away after her husband's illness, after the bills piled up, and after the music simply stopped. As she walked home with her small bag of groceries, she passed the community hall. Through the window, she could see a few volunteers cleaning up after the event. The old piano still stood in the corner, covered with a white sheet now. She paused for a moment, staring at it. A wave of emotion rose inside her, not sadness exactly, but something softer like nostalgia. She hadn't realized how much she had missed the feeling of playing. That evening, as she sat by the window with her tea, there was a knock at the door. She opened it to find the man who had asked her to play the night before. He stood there with a sheepish smile, holding a small bouquet of wildflowers. "Hello," he said. "I hope I'm not bothering you." "Not at all," she said kindly. "Come in." He stepped inside, looking around the small, tidy room. "I just wanted to apologize if I made you uncomfortable last night. It was meant as a joke, but, well, I think I ended up learning a lesson." She chuckled softly. "You don't need to apologize. If anything, you gave me a reason to play again." He smiled, relieved. "Well, I'm glad. Because you were amazing. I think everyone felt something they hadn't in a long time." She nodded, her gaze lowering to the teacup in her hands. It felt nice. Strange, but nice. They talked for a while, about the event, about the piano, about how the whole town seemed to be talking about her performance. He told her that someone had even recorded a video and posted it online. She looked surprised. "Online?" she asked, almost amused. "Yes," he said, laughing. "It already has thousands of views. People are calling it the miracle of the broken piano." She shook her head in disbelief. "Oh dear. I'm not sure I'm ready for that kind of attention." "It's all good attention," he said quickly. "People are touched by it. Some even said it made them cry. They said it reminded them of what music really means." She was quiet for a moment, staring out the window. "Music has a way of finding people," she said softly. "Even when you think it's gone, it waits for the right moment to come back." The man smiled, nodding. Before he left, he said, "If you ever want to play again, the hall is open most days. I can ask the committee to let you use the piano whenever you want." "Thank you," she said. "Maybe I will." After he left, she sat for a long time thinking. The thought of playing again filled her with both excitement and fear. She hadn't touched a proper piano in years, not since she sold hers to pay for her husband's treatment. But deep down she missed it. It was part of her, even if she had buried it for years. The next afternoon, she decided to visit the hall again. The door was open, and sunlight streamed through the tall windows, casting warm light on the wooden floor. The piano was still there, the white sheet folded neatly beside it. She ran her hand over its surface, feeling the rough edges, the worn keys. It wasn't a grand piano, not even a good one, but it had something, a kind of soul that came from years of being played, loved, and forgotten. She sat down slowly and pressed a few keys. The sound was still uneven, but she smiled. It was enough. She began to play again, quietly at first. Simple tunes, old folk songs she remembered from her childhood, melodies her mother used to hum. The hall was empty, but her music filled it anyway. For the first time in years, she felt peace. Unbeknownst to her, someone passing by the hall stopped to listen. It was a young woman walking her dog. She peered through the window, enchanted by the music. She pulled out her phone and recorded a short clip, just as the woman finished playing. Later that evening, she uploaded it to the same online page where the first video had been shared. By the next morning, that clip was being shared even more widely. Comments poured in. "Her playing feels like home. It's not perfect, but it's full of heart. I can't stop listening. There's something real in her music." The woman didn't know any of this. She simply continued her quiet life. visiting the hall every few days to play when no one was around. It became her little ritual. Sometimes she played soft, hopeful melodies. Other times, pieces filled with longing. The broken piano became her companion again, each note healing something inside her that had been silent for too long. A week later, she received a letter from the town council. They wanted to thank her for bringing new life to the piano and to the community. They also mentioned that a few people had offered to donate money to have the piano repaired and tuned. Reading the letter, she smiled quietly. She never imagined her small moment would lead to all this. That weekend, when she went to the market, people greeted her warmly again. Someone even handed her a small bouquet of daisies and said, "For the lady who brought music back to town." She didn't know what to say. She just smiled, touched by the kindness. Later that evening, she returned to the hall. The piano had been cleaned and polished, and a note sat on the music stand. "Thank you for reminding us that beauty lives even in broken things." She sat down, took a deep breath, and began to play once more. This time the notes rang clearer. The sound carried beyond the open doors, out into the street where people walking by stopped to listen. They didn't know her story, not fully, but they didn't need to. Her music spoke for her, and as the evening sun dipped low, her fingers moved gracefully over the keys, turning an old, forgotten piano into something magical again. The same instrument that had once been a joke was now a symbol of hope, and the quiet woman who played it had unknowingly begun to change her little town in ways she could never have imagined. The days that followed were unlike anything the woman had experienced in years. The town, which had always been quiet and predictable, now had a new kind of energy. People spoke of music, kindness, and second chances. Children hummed the melody she had played at the hall, and older residents found themselves talking about how they once played an instrument long ago but had given it up. Somehow her music had stirred something gentle in everyone. The woman herself tried to carry on as usual. She didn't think much about fame or attention. To her, it had only been a moment of connection, a song shared with her neighbors. But that moment had grown far beyond the small town. The video of her playing had now reached people in other cities, even other countries. Comments poured in, messages from strangers who said her music had brought them peace or made them remember someone they loved. She didn't own a computer, but when the young man who had first asked her to play stopped by to show her on his phone, she could hardly believe it. There were hundreds of thousands of views, and kind messages filled the screen. She read a few out loud, her voice soft with disbelief. "This touched my heart." She smiled faintly. "She plays with her soul." The man grinned. "You see, I told you it meant something." She shook her head gently. "It's strange, isn't it? I just played a few old notes and now the world is listening." He laughed softly. Sometimes that's all it takes. Despite the attention, she remained humble. Every few days, she still went to the hall to play quietly when no one was around. But it was getting harder to stay unnoticed. People would pass by, hear her music, and stop to listen. Some even brought flowers or small notes of thanks, leaving them near the piano. One afternoon, she arrived at the hall to find a small crowd already waiting inside. There were children, parents, and even a few elderly couples. They had come to hear her play again. She was surprised but didn't want to disappoint them. She smiled and sat down at the piano. "This old thing isn't perfect," she said softly, resting her fingers on the keys. "But maybe that's what makes it special." And then she began to play. This time the song was lighter, hopeful, like sunlight breaking through clouds. The children sat cross-legged on the floor, watching her fingers dance over the keys. Parents held hands, swaying gently to the rhythm. For a moment, everyone in the room shared the same feeling: peace. When she finished, there was a long, warm silence before the applause came. A few of the children ran up to her and hugged her. She laughed, touched by their innocence. "Can you teach us to play like that?" One little girl asked. She smiled. "Maybe not like me, but I can teach you to play in your own way." That small promise turned into something unexpected. Within a week, the community hall started a simple music group for children. The piano was tuned and repaired thanks to donations, and the woman began coming twice a week to teach. She didn't charge anything. She only asked that the children enjoy themselves and never forget the joy of music. The first day of class was chaotic but wonderful. The children were full of curiosity, some too small for the piano bench, others eager to show off what they thought they already knew. The woman guided them patiently, showing them how to place their fingers, how to listen carefully, how to feel the rhythm rather than chase perfection. You don't have to be perfect, she told them. You just have to mean it. Her words became the heart of the little group. Parents began staying to listen, and soon the hall was alive with laughter and simple tunes. The broken piano, once ignored, had become the heart of the community again. One afternoon, as she packed up after a lesson, the man who had first invited her to play stopped by again. He leaned against the door frame, watching her with a fond smile. "I can't believe how much has changed because of you," he said. She chuckled softly. "Because of me? I think it's because of that old piano." He shook his head. "No, it's because of what you gave us. You reminded everyone that even the smallest moments can matter." She paused, thinking, "Maybe, but I think it reminded me of something too." He tilted his head. "What's that?" She looked down at her hands, still resting lightly on the keys. "That it's never too late to come back to what you love. Even if you think it's gone, it waits for you." Her words lingered in the air, gentle and true. That evening, after everyone left, she stayed behind a little longer. The hall was quiet except for the faint hum of the lights. She played a soft tune, something slow, tender, almost like a conversation with the past. As she played, she thought about her husband, the man who had once sat beside her at another piano years ago, smiling proudly as she practiced. She had lost so much after he passed, but in this moment, she felt he was there, listening. When she finished, she looked up and saw a small group of people standing at the door, watching silently. They hadn't meant to interrupt, but they couldn't bring themselves to leave. One of them whispered, "It's beautiful." She smiled quietly and nodded. "Thank you." Word spread quickly about the music classes and her evening playing sessions. More people began coming, not just from town but from nearby places. Local news covered her story, calling her the heart behind the piano. Reporters came to interview her, but she always spoke simply, never making it about herself. "I just wanted to play again," she told them. "That's all. I think music does the rest." The video of her teaching the children also began circulating online. People loved how gentle she was with them, how she encouraged each child with patience and warmth. One clip where she guided a shy little boy through his first song touched millions of viewers. They could see the way she leaned close, whispering, "Don't worry about getting it right. Just feel it." For her, though, none of it felt like fame. It felt like life finding its way back. The piano had given her something she didn't realize she needed, a reason to connect again, to give, to heal. One evening, as she locked up the hall, she found a letter slipped under the door. It was from someone she didn't know. The handwriting was neat but hesitant. "Dear Madam," it began, "I lost my wife 2 years ago. I haven't been able to listen to music since. But last week I saw your video, and I cried for the first time in a long while. Your music reminded me that beauty still exists even after loss. Thank you." She stood there, the paper trembling slightly in her hands. Tears welled in her eyes, not from sadness but from understanding. She folded the letter carefully and tucked it into her bag. It became one of the few things she would always carry with her. From then on, every time she played not just for herself but for all the people who had written to her, who had found comfort in her music. Her quiet gift had turned into something far greater than she could have imagined. One weekend, the town decided to organize a small concert to raise money for the children's music program. They asked her to be the main performer. At first, she hesitated, unsure if she was ready to be on a stage again. But then she thought of the children, of the broken piano that had started it all, and she agreed. The night of the concert, the hall was full. Families, friends, and even visitors from other towns filled the seats. The air buzzed with excitement and warmth. When she walked onto the small stage, the crowd erupted into applause. She smiled shyly, feeling her heart flutter. The piano was no longer broken, but its scars remained, a reminder of its past. She placed her hands on the keys and began to play. The music flowed easily, full of life and feeling. The room seemed to breathe with her notes. Some people closed their eyes, others held hands. A few tears shimmered in the soft light. By the time she played the final note, the hall was completely still. Then slowly the applause began, soft at first, then thunderous. People stood, clapping and cheering. Some of the children she had taught ran up to the stage with flowers. She laughed, her eyes glistening. It wasn't just about music anymore. It was about connection. How one small act, one moment of courage, could ripple through so many lives. That night, as she walked home under the stars, the woman felt something she hadn't felt in years, a quiet sense of purpose. She had spent so long believing her best days were behind her. But now she knew the truth. Beauty doesn't fade. It waits patiently, ready to return when we find the courage to listen again. And in that small town, because of her, music had found its way home. The concert changed everything for the woman and for the town. For many who attended, it was more than just music. It felt like they had witnessed something honest and rare. People talked about it for days, replaying the moment when she had closed her eyes and let the music carry her away. Even those who had never cared much about music found themselves moved by what they had heard that night. It was as if she had spoken to them through the keys, saying all the things that words couldn't. The morning after, she woke to find a pile of letters left at her door. Some were from people in town, others from faraway places. Many said the same thing. They had watched her concert online and wanted to thank her. A few asked if she could record more music. Reading them, she felt both grateful and shy. She had never sought attention, but it touched her deeply to know her music meant something to so many. She spent the morning sitting at her small kitchen table, reading every letter slowly, her cup of tea growing cold beside her. Each one felt personal, like a conversation between strangers who somehow understood each other. Some spoke of grief, others of joy. One letter from a young girl stood out. It said, "When I saw you play, I decided I want to learn the piano too. You made it look like magic." The woman smiled, her eyes warm. She folded the letter carefully and placed it with the others she had kept. They were reminders of how far a small act of courage could travel. Later that day, she went to the community hall as usual. The piano sat in its place, polished and proud. Sunlight streamed through the windows, lighting up the old wooden floor. She ran her fingers over the keys, feeling their smooth surface. The piano had become a part of her again, something she could not imagine her days without. As she began to play softly, the door creaked open. The man who had once asked her to play that first night stepped inside. He smiled when he saw her. "I thought I'd find you here," he said. "You've been busy?" She laughed lightly. "I suppose I have. It still feels strange sometimes. All this attention," he nodded. "It's well-deserved. You've brought people together in a way no one else could." She smiled gently but didn't answer. Her hands continued moving across the keys, filling the hall with a calm melody. He sat down on one of the benches, listening quietly. When she finished, he said, "You know, the mayor wants to meet you. They're planning to name the new music room after you." She froze for a second, looking surprised. "After me? That's not necessary." "It's their way of thanking you," he said. "The whole project started because of what you did." She shook her head softly. "All I did was play. The rest came from everyone else," he smiled. "Maybe, but someone had to start it." She didn't argue. She just smiled and looked down at the piano again. "If it helps the children have a place to learn, then I'm happy." In the weeks that followed, construction began on a small addition to the community hall, a proper music room with instruments, books, and space for lessons. The woman visited often, watching as it slowly came together. The children who attended her classes could hardly contain their excitement. They drew pictures of pianos and hung them on the walls as decorations. Each day the room felt more alive. While all this happened, the woman continued her quiet routine. She taught, she played, and she listened to others. Her kindness drew people to her. Those who came to the hall didn't just come for music, they came to talk, to share, to feel at peace. It became a gathering place for stories, laughter, and sometimes tears. One afternoon, as she finished a lesson, an elderly man approached her. He was dressed neatly, carrying a walking cane. "I just wanted to thank you," he said, his voice trembling a little. "My wife used to play the piano before she got sick. When I heard you play, I felt like I was hearing her again." The woman reached out and gently touched his hand. "That's a beautiful thing to say. I'm glad it reminded you of her." He nodded, eyes glistening. "It did more than that. It made me feel like she was still here somehow." After he left, she sat at the piano for a long time, her hands resting on her lap. She thought about all the people her music had touched, all the quiet connections that had formed because of it. She had never imagined her small act would reach this far. A few days later, the local news team came again to film an update on the music project. They asked if she would like to perform a short piece for the camera. she agreed, though her heart raced with nerves. She wasn't used to being filmed. Still, she sat down, took a deep breath, and began to play. The room fell silent. Even the camera crew forgot their work for a moment. When she finished, one of them said softly, "It's like the piano is telling a story." She smiled. "Maybe it is. It's an old piano. It has a lot to say." That evening, the new video spread online quickly. It reached even more people than before. Messages came in from around the world, from teachers, musicians, and ordinary people who said her story inspired them to pick up their instruments again, or to find joy in something they had lost. One message came from a young man who said, "My mother passed away last year. I hadn't touched my guitar since then, but after hearing you play, I took it out again. Thank you for reminding me that music doesn't die, it just waits." She read that message several times, her heart heavy yet full. It reminded her of her own journey, the years she had spent avoiding the piano because it hurt too much to play. Now she realized that music wasn't something to fear. It was something that carried both pain and healing at once. The new music room opened a month later. The mayor, the townspeople, and all the children attended the small ceremony. The woman stood quietly near the front, feeling both proud and humbled. When the curtain was pulled aside, revealing a shiny plaque that read, "Harmony Room, dedicated to the woman who brought music back to our town," she felt tears fill her eyes. People clapped. Children cheered, and she smiled shyly, holding back emotion. She gave a small speech, her voice trembling slightly.
"I don't think of this as my achievement," she said.
"This room belongs to all of you, to every child who dares to play, to every person who listens, and to everyone who believes that something broken can still be beautiful." The room erupted in applause. Some of the children ran up to hug her again. In that moment, surrounded by so much warmth, she realized how far she had come from that night when she had been asked to play as a joke. What began as laughter had turned into a gift that kept giving. That evening, after everyone had left, she stayed behind in the new music room. She sat at the piano, the same one from the hall, now fully repaired and shining under the lights. The room was quiet, filled with the scent of fresh paint and wood polish. She placed her hands on the keys and began to play a gentle tune. It was soft, almost like a whisper. As the melody filled the empty room, she closed her eyes and let herself remember her husband, her youth, her lost years, and this unexpected new chapter. The notes seemed to float in the air, wrapping around her like an embrace. She finished playing and sat still for a long time. Then she whispered, "Thank you," though it wasn't clear who she was speaking to, the piano, life, or perhaps someone she still carried in her heart. When she walked home that night, the town was quiet under a blanket of stars. The streets glowed softly with lamplight, and the air was cool. She felt a calm sense of peace. The world had given her something she hadn't expected, a second chance not just to play but to live fully again. At her doorstep, she paused and looked back toward the hall. She could still hear the faint echo of the piano in her mind. For the first time in many years, she smiled without any trace of sadness. The music had come back to her, and with it, a life filled with meaning once more.